What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 22 of the Hoop Venue podcast. My name is Tyler. As always, I'm joined by my great friend Sean, and we've got a special one for you guys. We are going to be selecting our 2025 NBA All-Star teams. This was the worst task I think I've ever had to do because, you could actually make an entire roster of snubs, and they would still be as competitive as the other two teams. The league is so talented, so stacked right now. Sean, I actually think you just finished up the touches of your list right now before we started recording. So how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of confidence?
I'm like a 4. I do not feel good at all. It's been so long, Tyler, that my mic was out of place, and I don't know if you saw me while the intro was playing. I'm scrambling to fix my mic. But in general, I'm like a 4. We'll see how this goes. And I said before we started, we'll see how much I regret this in about 30 minutes.
Yeah, dude. One of our big talking points off camera was the Eastern Conference front court specifically being a lot just relatively weaker than some other positions. And that kind of created a gripe for me in terms of just laying out my All-Stars because I think it should be somewhat positionless. I like the idea of including all these players, but I think there should be more wild cards than there are position players. And it's just because you run into weird issues. On my list, you're going to see I have a player who I have as an all-star who I don't think has been the best player on his team. But because of the way the positions line up, the better player isn't an all-star. And it doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense to have it like that. And we'll talk about that when we get to those players. But yeah, man, I'm pushing for maybe I get it for the starters. For the starters, I think 2 backcourt, 3 frontcourt makes perfect sense. Bench, I would maybe go 1 backcourt, 2 front court, and then what would that be? 4 or 5 wild cards, 6 wild cards, something like that. Just because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to penalize players for being listed as a guard instead of a forward. It just doesn't make sense to me. But without further ado, I want to get into a couple injury omissions. So we didn't have a set criteria for how we determined our players. It wasn't you got to play a minimum amount of games, you got to have a certain amount of minutes. For me personally, and Sean might be a little bit different, I went, okay, you need to have played a big enough sample for me to accurately gauge your level of play. So for that, I would say Franz Wagner. He played 28 games, 859 minutes, I think it was. You have played enough for me to gauge the level that you're at. But Franz isn't healthy right now, so I didn't include him. So those were my 2 criteria points. It was we need to have a big enough sample, and you need to be healthy right now. So I actually came up with 6 omissions. I had 3 in the East, 3 in the West. I mentioned Franz. He was one of them. His teammate Paolo was another one. He's healthy right now, but he's only played 9 games. We can't really judge off of that. And then the last one was Joel Embiid. Pretty obvious. It goes without saying. In the West, I had Luka Doncic. He's a tough one. He's only played 22 games, so I think we've had enough to gauge, and we just know who Luka is at this point. But not healthy and actually might not even be back before the All-Star break, so I didn't include him. Chet Holmgren goes without saying, and then Zion Williamson goes without saying. Did you have any other guys, or did you have any different things you looked at criteria-wise for injuries?
Basically, I kind of set at a strict, you have to have played at least 850 minutes. That was kind of the only big difference, I think. Otherwise, we're kind of on the same platform there in terms of
for sure.
what we're thinking.
You want to get into it? You want to get into our picks?
Yeah. How do we want to set this up?
I was saying, do you want to start with the West or the East?
Let's start in the East, I think.
Yeah, I think the East is the easier conference until you get to the backup guards. And then it's oh my gosh, what do we do?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go in order. My first backcourt pick as my number 1 starter was Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
Did you have him as well?
He was my
your number one?
He was my number 1.
Yeah, I think kind of goes without saying. He's taken a leap this year, in my opinion, as a playmaker and as a decision maker. He really figured out the 2-man game with Cat. What's he averaging? 26 points, 7 assists. He's having a career high across the board in efficiency, over 60% true shooting.
Yeah.
It's just for one of the best teams in the league, specifically a top 3 offense, what he does as a creator, as a decision maker, and as a shooter without turning the ball over, I just think kind of goes without saying.
Yeah, I mean, legit 3-level scorer, the engine for their offense, obviously. him and Cat, like you said, they really figured it out. Where at first it wasn't the cleanest, but they've really been able to figure it out. And Cat, in some ways, has even made Jalen Brunson's life a lot easier with their 5-out spacing now. So Jalen Brunson might have been my easiest guard pick for both conferences, outside of Shea, obviously.
Shea, yes, I was gonna say.
But yeah, this was pretty easily my guard one.
Yeah, and another thing that I think is interesting to consider is the defense. Like, I think Brunson is a negative defender, but I don't think he's, like, worst in the league territory. It's like you can build a good defense around this guy.
Yeah.
And he's going to do some things. Like, he's going to get into the right spot, take some charges. He's going to make some plays. So, yeah, I think Brunson, perfectly easy pick at number 1. Who was your second player in the backcourt in the Eastern starters?
So, yeah, this is where I immediately don't feel great. My second guard backup spot, not my second guard backup spot, my second guard pick to start, my second guard was Donovan Mitchell still.
Fair, yeah.
And for me, it was Donovan Mitchell because I get it. This has been a down year production-wise for Donovan Mitchell, but I just accredit that to the Cavs as a team just being, a way more well-constructed team. Kenny Atkinson coming in, kind of taking some of the load off of Donovan Mitchell. But I still think there are games. I think they played the Timberwolves last night. He dropped like 38. When there are moments that you need Donovan Mitchell to just put the team on his back, he still has the moments of doing that. And I still think he is the best player on the best team, on the most dominant team in the league. I mean, yeah, they got blown out by the Thunder the other night, but that's what, their 5th loss on the year. So I just kept it easy, went with the best player on the best team in the league, and I went with Donovan Mitchell.
That's totally fair way of framing it. I'm a huge Donovan Mitchell guy. I have been saying pretty much the whole season that I feel like he kind of just took a little bit of a backseat on the box score wise. Like,
yeah,
he went from 27 points and 6 assists last year to 23 points and 4.5 assists this year. And to me, it's like, okay, you're putting the ball in Garland and Mobley's hands more. What worries me is the percentages. He's shooting 49% on 2-pointers, and it stems from the fact that he was 67% at the rim last year, and this year he's like 56 or 57%.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's about. Like, I don't think that's a team thing. I think that, because if anything, I'd say their spacing got better. So to me, it's a little bit weird to see that sharp of a regression at the rim. And I think for a player whose game is primarily built on, I'm going to either slash or I'm going to pull up for this 3. The pull-up three's been there. He's been an elite pull-up shooter, but the slashing hasn't. And I think there's been moments, like, I agree with you, there's been takeover moments. There's also been moments where he kind of just can't get to anything because the pull-up three isn't falling. Like, both OKC games, for example, just a complete non-factor in both OKC games. So Mitchell, for me, was on my All-Star team. I didn't have him starting, though. I did have him as one of my backcourt spots on the bench, which we'll get to in a sec. I just think it's a step down from what I got used to with Mitchell for like 3 or 4 years in a row, where he was just like this ultra, I'm going to kill you at the rim or I'm going to kill you from 3. It's been a little bit different this year, although, like you said, he's on the best team. He's still like part of what drives that all-time great offense. He's perfectly fine defensively. So yeah, Mitchell, I think, is still an all-star lock. My second backcourt starter was actually Darius Garland, his teammate.
Oh, okay.
This was a tough one for me because just like a week and a half ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago, I was on Twitter saying that I still think Mitchell has been the best backcourt player for Cleveland. And now I've kind of flipped. I've watched a little more Garland. I watched both of those OKC games, and I'm starting to pick up on some things. So I think Mitchell is the better defensive player, but I don't, just like with Brunson, I don't think Garland's a bad defender. Like,
yeah, you can build around him.
Like an outright team killing defender. He's not great, but he's kind of fine. To me, I think Garland, for one, is the better off-ball player. I think Garland plays better off of Mitchell than Mitchell plays off of Garland.
Sure.
I think Garland's also at this point maybe a little bit better at getting into the defense. He doesn't provide the same amount of rim pressure, but in terms of just like, I'm going to use my shifty handle to just get inside the arc and cause some commotion, Garland is like world class at that, even if he isn't a great finisher. He's got the floater, he's got the mid-range game, whatever. To me, both of these guys have been pretty three-point reliant as scorers this season, and Garland is just casually having one of the greatest shooting seasons ever. He's shooting 42.5% from 3 on 7 attempts a game. He's shooting 91% on free throws. Like, if you look at Garland's profile as a shooter, he stacks up with like most of NBA history. I would say his closest shooting profile is probably like Mark Price on like ironically another guard who kind of had a similar play style, played for Cleveland in the 90s. Is recognized as an all-time great shooter. I think Garland's having an all-time great shooting season, and I think that gives his scoring a little bit of a higher floor than Mitchell, because I think Mitchell is more of a streaky type of shooter, whereas Garland's like, I'm going to consistently make 40% of my threes, and you can't take that away from me.
Yeah.
And the OKC games really stand out to me. Like the first game, he absolutely diced OKC up in the pick and roll. They were hedging all of his pick and rolls. He was getting it to Allen or Mobley in the short roll, and then that big-to-big passing was taking over. Garland, they couldn't do anything for Garland. Whereas with Mitchell, like I said, he was pretty much a non-factor in that game. Even in the second Cleveland game or OKC game, Cleveland's offense fell off a cliff, right? Like they couldn't do anything in that first half. Garland still had 15 points and 5 assists on 75% shooting in the first half. He was quite literally the only player to show up for Cleveland in that game. And it was because he was killing them in isolation. Like I said, one of OKC's big adjustments in that game was we're going to switch every action and force you to play one-on-one, kill the ball movement. And Garland was like, okay, Lou Dort, Kaysen Wallace, Alex Caruso, none of you can stay in front of me, so I'm just going to kill you in ISO. And it was like, that's where I really had the shift. I was like, Garland is really that guy. So going into the playoffs, I'm pretty sold that Mitchell's their number one guy. But if we're just going off of the 40 games we've seen in the regular season, I would make the case that Garland has been the better player just from a regular season standpoint. So to me, Garland actually got my starting spot, and I'm so glad to say that because I feel like Garland he just flies under the radar for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like, Garland is such a good player. He's so good.
He's so good.
He's so good. So that's my spiel. Did you have Garland on your list?
Yeah, it's time for me to glaze Darius Garland. Darius Garland was my next guard in the backcourt. Yeah. I just want to add on. I posted some synergy data. I just want to add on to some of the stuff you said. If you leave Darius Garland wide open, you might as well just get back on defense or get back and get ready to play offense. Because Darius Garland on unguarded catch-and-shoot threes is shooting 53%.
Bro.
Uncontested or unguarded catch-and-shoot. I don't know why they just don't say, like, uncontested and contested. Like, why are we doing the unguarded nonsense for? On guarded catch-and-shoot threes, 37%. He's shooting 47.2% on catch-and-shoot threes this season.
Ridiculous, bro.
38% on pull-up threes, which, to your point about his ability as a on- and off-ball player, dog, he's in the 90th percentile in pick-and-roll ball handler efficiency. He's in the 83rd percentile in spot-up efficiency. He's in the 66th percentile in isolation efficiency, 68th percentile transition efficiency. Like, this dude is just an efficient magnet offensively, and it allows him to play on and off ball really, really well with Donovan Mitchell. I'm glad you said that, like, he's gone under the radar, because I feel like to a lot of the NBA analysts that have been watching the Cavs this season, I think you're obviously going to put Darius Garland, but I feel like to a blind eye, it's going to be like Darius Garland over X name that's going to be left off this list.
I want to add to that point just for a sec, because I think that's the names I've seen Garland flying around with. It's like most of the, I don't want to say inefficient, but like the volume creator guys that are on like middle of the pack playoff teams that like put up crazy numbers. And then it gets overlooked what type of play it takes to go on a team like the Cavs and just raise that ceiling to like, now you're an all-time great offense instead of just a good one. That's so hard to do. That's so hard to do. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because like a lot of these other guys, sure, maybe Garland can't go on a team that lacks a lot of spacing and give you 25 and 12. But can those guys get onto this Cleveland team and be like, hey, I'm going to shoot. Garland has a 64% true shooting. How many guards in the league can do that? Steph Curry, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, stop the list. It's so I'm glad you brought that up. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're absolutely good. For me, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, my two backcourt starters, and then Darius Garland is my first bench guard player.
So Mitchell was my second bench guard player. So we're pretty much on the same line of thinking, just flipping Mitchell and Garland. Just to throw the box score at everyone, because a lot of people will go off the box score to base these things. Garland this year is averaging 21 points and 7 assists on 64% true shooting. Mitchell is averaging 23 points, 4.5 assists on 58% true shooting. So to me, that kind of sells the case. It's like both of those guys have to be all-stars, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's just like, who are you giving more credit to? One of them has to be a starter. So
and not to cut you off, but never at any point did I not have both of them as all-stars. Regardless of, like, the positioning, like, they were always, like, all-stars for me.
And both of them were always above the wild card for me.
Yeah.
They were always, like, just in that first mix. All right, who was your first front court guy? This is so easy. Who's your first front court guy?
Giannis.
Yeah, do we really even need to talk? I feel like some guys we don't really need to talk about. Like, it's Giannis.
Yeah.
And the second front court guy we also don't need. Wait, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to go back to guards. Did you, like, give your other – there's 4 backcourt guys.
Yeah.
You give 3.
Well, I was going to go starters and then start with the bench.
Okay, my bad.
No,
okay.
You're good. I mean, we could do it either way, really. They all make sense.
Front court, so Giannis. Front court's really easy. It's Giannis, Tatum, and Cat.
So Cat was an easy pick for you. That was a lock for you.
Yeah, that was a lock.
Okay, so for me, Giannis and Tatum were easy locks. Like, just jot them down. Cat, I also had as my next starter. I did have Cat starting. But for me, it was a pretty interesting back and forth with Evan Mobley.
Okay.
I think, like, it was a tough one because, again, Mobley's another guy in the Cavs that's kind of tough to, like, attribute what value goes where. I think a lot of Mobley's offensive leap is awesome. I also think some people might be going a little bit too far because of the fact that he plays with both Mitchell and Garland. So he's always going to have so many opportunities, like, basically gift wrapped for him. I think Mobley, like, we saw it in the OKC game. And I hate to just keep clinging on to, like, a game against this perfect defense. But, like, in the second OKC game, so the first OKC game, Mobley 8. And it's because OKC was putting 2 on the ball for Garland and Mitchell. And then you have Mobley and Allen, big to big passing, all that good stuff. In the second game, they started switching those actions and then doubling Mobley in the post. And Mobley didn't really do anything. He was kind of just a non-factor. And I think it's like that is the type of stuff where some of the offensive leap can maybe get overstated. I think he's a good offensive player. He's been a very per 75 possessions, I think he's averaging like 22 points on plus 9% efficiency. So, like, you're getting some serious offensive value, and he's a good passer, he's a good offensive rebounder. But I do think a lot of his value is driven by the elite backcourt. And defensively, I think, obviously he's a world-class defender, he's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. But I don't view him, and we talked about this, I actually think we talked about this when we were on the Defenders episode over at with our good friend Mars. I was like, I think Mobley is not quite like best in the league tier yet. I still think he's a little bit questionable at times as a drop defender. His positioning isn't always great. He kind of relies on like physical tools to make a lot of plays, and it's like, yeah, you have this ultimate defensive Swiss Army knife where it's like, we can put you on wings, we can put you on fives, we can have you play drop, switch, hedge, whatever you need to do. Mobley can do it. But in terms of like, I'm going to be a full-time 5 and I'm going to hold down this defense as the anchor. I don't know, and it's maybe it's just because we haven't seen it because he plays with Allen. I don't know if he can do that yet, like a Gobert or like an Anthony Davis. So that kind of holds me back on his defense. So for me, it was like, I think Mobley's offensive leap slightly overstated. Defense, I'm not quite best in the league tier at. So for me, Cat gets the edge by just being just this just ridiculous offensive player. Like, what is Cat averaging? It's like got to be like 25, 12, and 4. Absurd efficiency. That we talked about the 2-man game with Brunson being like the catalyst to an not all time, but like elite offense. I think Cat gets the nod, but like I was saying, Cat starter, Mobley was my first front court guy in the bench, and I thought they were pretty close, but I ultimately did go with Cat.
So, not to like discredit Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley was my first bench front court player. Cat get the unreal efficiency. He's had an incredible offensive season. Per 75, 26 points, 11.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists. Shooting, 60, 50, 40 from all 3 levels of the floor per 75. Like, he's had a ridiculous year while being, league average, 58% true shooting, I think? So while being like a +8, almost a +9 efficiency relative to the rest of the league. Crazy. Cat's been phenomenal. I'm glad that the PR for Cat has gotten so much better. Now that he's in New York, now he's playing really, really well next to Brunson. So for me, the Knicks have 2 starters.
You know what's interesting is I was thinking about it just now. I think you could make the argument that Mobley has been the best player on the Cavs this season. Like with that Garland Mitchell argument, like I think you could also make the argument that it's been Mobley. Like yeah, in terms of just pure value, I think it's like a 3-headed snake. Which makes it tough because then it's like I have Garland in the starters, Mobley on the bench, but am I even really confident that Garland's been better than Mobley?
Sure.
I don't know because like I kind of just crapped all over Mobley for no reason in comparing him to Cat. But like I want to just really like harp on the fact that Mobley's having a ridiculous season.
Yeah.
Like they've put the ball in his hands more as a legitimate offensive creator and playmaker. He's killing teams off of ball screens. He's killing teams in isolation.
Turned into a legit mismatch hunter.
Mismatch hunter and a legit spacer.
Yeah.
Like he's been legitimately spacing the floor as a 3-point shooter. He doubled his 3-point attempts, is making 42% of them. He's shooting 62% on twos. He shoots like 80% damn near at the rim. And that's like not just spoon-fed looks. It's like I'm going to self-create and get to the rim. Even in transition, like I'm going to play an early offense and get to the rim. I think Mobley deserves credit. Like he's a legitimately good offensive player. And like I said, I don't view him as like a best in the world type of defender, but I do still view him as like a top 3 to 5 defensive player of the year candidate. Mm-hmm. So if you're that level of defender and a good offensive player, not only are you an all-star, you're an all-NBA player. So Mobley probably will end up making an all-NBA team. And so, yeah, I think Mobley, first front court guy off the bench. So off the bench, I have so far Mitchell and Mobley. You had Garland and Mobley. Yeah. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so my first backcourt guy off the bench was Damian Lillard.
That was also my other guy off the bench.
Okay, so I'm glad we're on the same page so far. I think Dame kind of goes without saying is having a little bit of a resurgence here. Bro, he's shooting 39% from 3 on 9 attempts a game.
That's insane.
Like, come on. He's averaging 25 points and 7 assists. Milwaukee's been a lot more competitive in this recent stretch. 62% true shooting. He kind of just got not all the way back to like the 2023 level or because that was just an absurd
all-time offensive season. That does not get talked about because that Portland team was just terrible.
Yeah. All-time great offensive season. And Lillard's somewhere in the middle between what he was last year and what he was in like 2023. He's figuring out the fit with Giannis, especially in the pick and roll and then off of handoffs. He's playing his role off the ball. He's getting to the rim, getting to the line. I think Dame, I think he's the worst defender we've talked about so far, so that matters. But in terms of just like sheer offensive firepower, yeah, Dame's had a ridiculous season.
Yeah. Not too much for me to add on. Dame's been incredible. A touchdown from that 2023 season, but I mean that 2023 season, like we said, is an all-time season. So yeah, I'm not going to penalize him for that.
So we haven't really gotten into the hot takes yet. I feel like we've named 7 players so far, and it's the same, or no, 8 players. Sorry, we've done 8 players so far, and we've had the same 8 as our like top 8. Now we get into the second front court guy, and this is where I'm gonna start to get a little spicy. So for me, my first front court guy in the East was Jared Allen.
I don't think that's spicy at all. I think that's also my first front court guy. Or after Evan Mobley, yeah. So it's Jared Allen.
Yeah. So my second, So Evan Mobley and then Jared Allen. I think Allen's case is a little bit different than the other guys because he's pretty clearly the weakest offensive player of any of them. Like I would say he's a positive offensive player, but nothing to write home about. It's like I'm gonna play pick and roll. I'm going to have the occasional post-up mismatch, but my value is purely going to be driven from the fact that I'm a big interior finisher and I can pass. Like, I can make the extra pass if you put 2 on the ball. And Allen's just like a connector on offense. He's a connector and a play finisher. And it's like, I'm going to give you 14 points, 3 assists, 2 assists, whatever. And it's going to be really efficient. I'm going to do my role. His value comes from the defense. I talked about how I don't know if Mobley's quite that anchor. Allen is. I think Mobley's the better defensive player than Allen because of all the stuff you can do with him. But in terms of just like what Allen brings to the table, great defensive rebounder, top probably 5 drop big in the league, elite rim protector. He can switch too. That's what's underrated about Allen. He can switch, he can hedge, he can pretty much do what you need him to do. He's a little bit less versatile than Mobley, but he's definitely a better drop big and a better like pure anchor. So for me, Allen's case is defense-driven. It's like, I'm a top 10 defender on the planet. I am a positive offensive player. It's different than like a Gobert, where you have to like cater to him offensively. Allen can just plug in and be a positive offensive player. So Yeah, for me, Allen, pretty easy pick as a front court guy.
Yeah, I didn't know that'd be a hot take. Jared Allen is my other. He's my other or second front court bench guy.
So I have a feeling I know who your third front court guy is.
Do you? Who's yours?
Mine is steamy.
Okay.
Mine is a very hot take, and I don't even know if anyone watching is going to have him on their list. Like, I was looking at it, and I'm like, why does this guy not get talked about? It is Pascal Siakam.
Okay. I had him as an honorable mention.
Okay, so Siakam, I think, is having a very underrated season, and I think it stems from the Pacers having such a slow start. Siakam on the year is averaging 20 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. He's very quietly shooting 40% from 3-on-4 attempts a game. And that's always kind of been the question mark for Siakam. It's like, can you rely on him to be a competent floor spacer if he's playing off the ball? This year, he's been exactly that. Getting to the line at a decent rate, shooting 57% on 2-pointers, which is higher than most of his Toronto years and right in line with what he did last year when he kind of broke out for the Pacers. 61% true shooting. The Pacers are +4 with him on the floor, -8 with him off the floor. So clearly one of the drivers behind that team. I think Siakam's just very underrated, man. I think in those Toronto years, I actually think he started to get a little overrated because people were like still considering him
as a one.
They were considering him a really good defender still because of like what he did with the championship year. And then it was like, no, Siakam. So I actually don't even think Siakam's that good of a defender anymore. I view him as like a neutral. Like, it's like, yeah, he's fine. He's going to do his job. But like, yeah, I think as a scorer, as an off-ball player, as a seamless plug into what the Pacers like to do with like early offense and Siakam destroys mismatches, bro. I don't think that gets talked about enough. You remember that Knicks series, dude? Like, Josh Hart, he was picking on Josh Hart, and Josh Hart can switch up.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I think Siakam, very underrated offensive player. And really, actually, I just pulled it up. The Pacers with Halliburton on the floor, Siakam off the floor this year in 400 minutes, -6 net rating. With Siakam on the floor and Halliburton off the floor, +2 net rating, also 400 minutes. And I don't think that means Siakam's the driving force behind their success. We'll get into that in a sec. But I think Siakam deserves an all-star shout. And I think 2 reasons. 1, he's not as big of a name as another guy. 2, Pacers had a really slow start and they're a really small market. So Siakam just kind of doesn't even get looked at. Like, I even think that guys like Jalen Johnson are going to get talked about more than Siakam.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of a little bit off to me. I think Siakam is having an awesome season, and I think he deserves some love. So who was your third front court guy in the East?
Curious, who did you think it was?
I thought it was Jaylen Brown.
It was Jaylen Brown.
And that's the one that I'm going to get a lot of heat for. I think having Siakam over Jaylen Brown sounds indefensible. So give me your case. Give me your case for Jaylen Brown. Let's do this.
I'm not going to lie, there isn't a fantastic case because for me, those were actually 3 of the guys that I did like consider for the last spot. Pascal is on my snub/honorable mention list. Along with Jalen Johnson. Maybe that's a spoiler for the wild cards, but I went 2 guards for the wild cards. I think the East guard slate is too good.
So yeah, let me preface this by saying I don't have Jaylen Brown as an all-star.
Yeah. So consider this as like Jaylen Brown getting my final all-star spot, even though you have the wild cards, but consider this being like the last spot.
That's how I felt about Siakam.
Yeah. With Jaylen Brown, this has been a down year for Jaylen Brown. Like if you look at like EPM offensively. Defensively, in terms of his defensive impact, he's kind of taken a step back if you look at some impact metrics. But I still think we've had this conversation pretty recently about Boston, actually, with like their, in air quotes, recent struggles, which I still kind of attribute them to being like, we already won. Let's just get to, especially this part of the season, where I think you kind of see this from teams that win titles anyway. Like, this is the part of the season where, all right, let's not get any injuries. We have the All-Star break coming up, and then All-Star break or after that or whatever, we'll ramp it up, and we get to the playoffs healthy, and we'll just remind everybody of how damn good we are, right? Because I think Boston's actually starting to get a little bit disrespected, and that Like, that's disgusting to say as a Laker fan. But specifically like a Jaylen Brown, he's still averaging this season. Now, before I say that, his efficiency is terrible. He's like
Terrible.
minus 4% relative true shooting compared to the rest of the league, where at least the years prior, he was like league average true shooting. Still shooting 61% at the rim. The mid-range efficiency has dropped a lot. Last season, 46% from the mid-range. This season, 39%. The three has always kind of been, inconsistent with Jaylen Brown in general. But I still value the advantage creation. I still think he, even though like impact metric-wise, he has to take a step back. I still view him as a good defender, and this has probably been one of his better years as a playmaker. I
agree with that. I think it's been his best.
Yeah, arguably his best year as a playmaker. He's still one of the driving forces behind one of the best teams in the league. Maybe not the best argument, but I win Jaylen Brown over Pascal and
fair.
Jaylen.
Like, I didn't think Jaylen Brown was just like tiers below Siakam. It was kind of really close to me. And what did it for me was the efficiency. Like, Boston has slipped. They're 7-7 in their last 14 games.
Yeah.
And a big part of that has been not only, another guy we'll maybe talk about is Derek White. He fell off a cliff out of nowhere.
God.
Fell off a cliff. Same with Drew Holiday. None of their three-point shooters can hit. Pritchard or Hauser not hitting. And I think Jaylen Brown has just only exacerbated these issues, because when that happens, you kind of need that star to like, okay, I'm going to step up and I'm going to like make this not look as bad as it should. And Tatum, I think, has done that. Like, shout out to Tatum. Jaylen Brown has not. Jaylen Brown across the board, I think he's having his best season as a playmaker, and I think he's having his best season as a slasher. I think he's getting to the rim a lot. He's finishing at the rim, and he's getting to the line at a career high rate. So it's like, those are good signs. Like, you're playmaking, and you're getting to the line, you're getting to the rim. The shooting is just like gone, and I don't know what to attribute that to. It could just be a slump, and he could be fine by the playoffs. But going off of what I value for all-star criteria, it's like, what have you done through your 40 game? Like, what have you done? Yeah. And Jaylen Brown just like has not produced. It's like last 2 years. So 2023, 57.6% from two. 2024, 57% from two. This year, 51.4% from two. It's the lowest since 2018. That's the last time he went below 51% on two-pointers. 32% from three on 6 attempts a game. That is a career low. His turnovers are up from last year. And so it's like the offensive signals are like basically saying, hey, yeah, you've made a couple improvements, but this other stuff that used to make you like an all-star caliber offensive player has slipped to now the point where you're like one of the least efficient volume scorers in the league. And he's not a good enough playmaker for me to be like, that's okay. Like, it's just slipped. And then it's the defensive motor. I think when we get into the playoffs, Jaylen Brown is like probably a top 10 wing defender in the league. That might be a hot take, maybe top 15. But like what you can do with him versatility wise as a man defender, and then like the fact that he offers legit rim protection and playmaking, world-class playoff defender. But in the regular season, the consistent motor, the night-to-night effort, non-existent. I think this has been probably his worst regular season as a defender since like 2019.
Yeah.
Like the amount of plays he's taken off, the amount of stuff he's just messing up coverage-wise. I just haven't been impressed with Jaylen Brown, and I don't know if Celtics fans will be mad at that or agree with me, because I've seen mixed signals on Twitter.
Yeah.
I think Jaylen Brown is going to be an all-star lock. He's the reigning Finals MVP and Conference Finals MVP. He's one of the biggest names in the sport. I think for the spirit of like who deserves to be an all-star, I just think Siakam's been better this season, and I think going into the playoffs I would take Jaylen Brown, but that's just not how I view this. So for me, Jaylen Brown has slipped enough to where I actually did not have him as an all-star this year, which is really weird because last year I think I ranked him as like the 21 or number 22 player in the league. And it's like for that to happen, and then Siakam, who I didn't even have in like my top 35 or whatever, to then be a better an all-star, it feels weird, but I feel good about it knowing like Jaylen Brown, like the Celtics are slipping. They're still really good, but they're slipping, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that their number 2 has not played up to par.
Yeah. Last 15 games for Jaylen Brown, so over this stretch of them slipping, 21 points. 21.8 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, 52.6% true shooting percentage over the past 15 games.
Negative 5%, man.
So.
And there are other guys who are inefficient, but all of those guys are like really elite playmakers.
Yeah.
Like they just create so much offense. And we'll probably talk about a couple of them. Yeah, we'll talk about, but Jaylen Brown is not that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what's weird for me. It's like maybe the defense could drive his value, but then that hasn't been there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I ended up snubbing Jaylen Brown. He was one of my first guys off. Okay. Now we get to the really, I think this is the toughest part. The two wild card spots in the East, because the guard pool is so stacked, and no matter what, you're going to end up with like 2 or 3 guys who should be all-stars not being all-stars. Yep. So who was your first wild card guy?
My first wild card guy is somebody we talked about early in the year. And we talked about his noticeable or potentially noticeable like scoring decline or whatever. And these last 15 games have kind of solidified him being an all-star for me. I just didn't know where to place him at. But for me, the first guy like to fill the spot for me was Trae Young.
Trae Young was my second guy. Okay.
So last 15 games for Trae Young, 26 points, 11 assists, 59.8% true shooting, which I will just take that and be happy with it if you're a Hawks fan. Trae Young being an average having average level of actually maybe even slightly above average efficiency.
It's like +2.
Yeah, +2 efficiency for Trae. Hell yeah. And I think you even had a tweet about it after that 40-point game the other night against Phoenix. I think it would have been. Yeah.
Phoenix,
It's like, oh hey, it's nice to see Trae finally have one of these fun scoring games. But he's doing it more often now. Like he's had counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 30-plus point games over the last 15, including against the Bucks, 35 and 10. It had 29 against the Timberwolves, 34 and 10 against the Raptors, 30 and 9 against the Nuggets, 33 and 9 against the Lakers, 43 and 5 against the Suns. But then, 28 and 11 against the Celtics, 20 and 14 against the Clippers. Like Trae, 23 and 16 against the Spurs. Like Trae is. This is the perfect argument to what you said. Like, okay, you're inefficient, but you are a world-class playmaker. And
Trae's the ultimate example.
He's the ultimate example of that. And outside of Luka, he's arguably the best on-ball playmaker in the league. Jokic is in his own separate category for that. But in terms of like, I'm going to hold the ball 100 times a game, and we're going to run spread, pick, and roll the entire game. Maybe outside of Luka Doncic, Trae is like number one in terms of like just the ability to make decisions consistently. There's not a coverage you can throw at him, and he's going to be, bothered by it. And the scoring is just kind of coming back. So for me, Trae is my first wild card, if you will.
Yeah, that's a totally fair. Like, makes absolutely complete sense. I think what's underrated about Trae's season is the type of lineups that the Hawks can put out and still have a competent offense. Yeah. Like, you look at their starting lineup: Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Risa Shea, Jalen Johnson, Clint Capella. Jalen Johnson is the best floor spacer in that lineup.
He's like 32% from three this year.
Yeah, it's like Trae has no space to operate whatsoever. And Quinn Snyder does a good job of making it work with the way they position themselves. But in terms of just like, you're a threat to shoot, Trae does not have that. So for him to still be like even just a semi-efficient 20 and 12 guy, absurd, because how are you getting 12 assists when nobody can make threes off of your passes? Oh, I know how. You're the best interior passer since Steve Nash. Like, Trae Young, the way he creates lobs, the way he creates for cutters, the way he uses his eyes to manipulate the defense and create pockets in the paint, like, bro, Trae Young is just such a ridiculous playmaker. Mm-hmm. And then he pairs that with like the handle to kind of get wherever he needs to go. I think his scoring floor and really his ceiling too are both really low. And it's just because like you can't really put pressure on the rim. You can't really score at the rim. He doesn't really score at the rim at all.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, that puts a really hard cap on his.
He's pretty easily like the worst rim finisher we've talked about, right?
Yeah, well, we're gonna talk about another one who might be worse. But yeah, of the guys we've talked about, like I talked about it with Garland, I would say Trae is like even a step below Garland when it comes to like, I'm going to put pressure on the rim and score at the rim. But what he does as a playmaker within that offense and the types of lineups they're able to construct, they're a winning team simply because of the fact that they can do whatever they need to do with athleticism, rebounding. Like also a Kongmu's emergence is in large part due
To Trae.
Young being able to just like do so much for him offensively. So yeah, I think Trae probably also the worst defender we've talked about. I still think I think he's improved, but I still think he's a very weak defender.
Yeah.
But he allows them to put good defensive lineups on the floor because he doesn't need offensive talent to do his thing. So I talked about the Garland variable where I was like, could these guys come in and do what Garland does? No, I don't think Trae could go on Cleveland and do what Garland does as an efficiency guy, as an off-ball guy, and as like a ceiling raiser. I also don't think Garland could go onto this Atlanta team, zero spacing, and be like, hey, we need you to average 12 assists a game and touch the ball 100 times, and we need to be a good offense. There's like 3 guys in the league who can do that. So yeah, I agree. Trae Young was actually my second wild card, but I felt good about him.
Who's your other one?
Cade Cunningham.
Okay, my other one was also Cade. I'm so glad you said Cade.
Yeah, so Cade, I think Cade has been, I think he's finally getting proper credit. I don't think he's underrated at this point. People are finally waking up to what he does. Absolutely surgical pick and roll creator.
Yeah.
Gets to his spots whenever, wherever. Has added the pull-up 3. He's doubled his 3-point attempts, and he's doubled his pull-up 3-point attempts, and he's shooting like 37%. Legitimate pull-up 3-point threat. Like I said, one of the best mid-range scorers on the planet. Elite passer. Another guy who you can give the ball to 90, 100 times and be like, hey, we need you to keep this offense afloat.
Yeah.
All Detroit had to do was get him like some semblance of competent threats next to him, and then he's just turned into like, 25 and 10 guy. And it's like, his efficiency is on the rise. The turnovers are a problem, but not to the point where it's like, yeah, Cade's too turnover prone to be an all-star. I don't think so. And also, the efficiency is in large part due to the rim finishing. I talked about, we might talk about a guy worse than Trae. Cade's rim finishing is bad. It's just straight up bad.
Yeah.
And what's funny to me is like, it's the type of thing where like I can see him improving. Like with Trae, that just is what it is. Like, it's a size thing. It's a physicality thing. I think Cade, like, what's funny, Cade doesn't have a Euro step. It doesn't exist in his arsenal. And it's like, if you just added a Euro step, you could probably add like 3 or 4% to your rim field goal percentage, because then the timing on your looks is going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think Cade, the rim finishing it just sucks. It just outright sucks. But everything else is so good. He's been one of the most efficient volume pick and roll guys in the league as both a passer and a scorer.
Yep.
He's a legit, also underrated Cade variable, elite post-up guy who just abuses mismatches. Does not get talked about as part of his game at all. Like, literally one of the best post-up players in the league. Actually, when I was making my video on post-ups, including passes, obviously it's a different type of post-up. I want to preface that, but more efficient than Jokic, Cat, and Wemby this season on post-ups, including passes. So, like, that is a legitimate source of offense. And then also, perfectly fine, maybe even plus defender.
Especially
like
this
Cade
year.
Cade's a decent defender. So yeah, I think the case was pretty easy for me. I think we're gonna talk about a guy who I had to snub, 2 guys I had to snub. And actually the defense was the needle mover for both those guys. It was like I can see the argument for them being better offensive players than Cade this year because of some of the efficiency and turnover stuff. But the defense for me is what moves the needle. It's like if I have to pick one. And that was the same thing with Trae. Like, Trae, I actually had Cade as my first wild card guy. It was like, I think Cade being a fine to good defender makes it a lot easier to construct lineups. And the fact that he's big, he's huge. He's a huge player. So, yeah, I think Cade deserves a lot of credit, man.
To your point really quickly about Cade's insane, like, pick and roll operation, out of players that have had at least 150 pick and rolls, including passes this season, which is 96 players in the league. Cade is 18th in efficiency. Some notable players really fast that Cade grades out higher than. It grades out higher than DeMar DeRozan, Trae Young, who we just talked about, Kevin Durant, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Tyrese Maxey, LeBron, Kyrie, De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker, who's, by the way, been on a tear recently, LaMelo Ball, a guy that neither one of us have on the list. Tyler Hero, a guy that neither one of us has on this list. Jason Tatum, James Harden, like Ja Morant, by a lot, actually. I didn't know Ja was that low. But, yeah, Cade's been phenomenal. And I love telling the story about how, in the offseason, doing my preseason power ranking series, like, you're familiar with a lot of these players. But then you actually have to sit down and watch him, and you're like, oh, shit, Cade Cunningham's really, really good. I knew he was good.
Yeah, if you looked at Cade's numbers last year, you'd probably be like, nah, he's all right. But then you watch him possession by possession, and you're like, oh, my gosh, there's something here. Like, I know what I'm witnessing.
Yeah. And you don't get a lot of these. So we're going to – I'm going to do a pod victory lap for the Pistons really quick. Pod victory
Shout
lap.
out to the
Pistons.
Shout out to Sean. Shout out to the Pistons.
All right. Honorable mentions in the East. Do run over both of our official Eastern Conference All-Star rosters. So my starters for the East, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell. My backcourt, my frontcourt, Giannis, Jason Tatum, Karl-Anthony Towns. For my bench, Darius Garland, Damian Lillard fill my 2 guard backup spots. Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Jaylen Brown fill my frontcourt backup spots. And then Trae Young and Cade Cunningham fill my wildcard Eastern Conference spots.
Well said. My starters, backcourt, Jalen Brunson and Darius Garland. Frontcourt, Giannis, Tatum, Cat. My 2 bench backcourt players, Damian Lillard and Donovan Mitchell. My 3 frontcourt players, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Pascal Siakam. My 2 wild cards, Cade Cunningham and Trae Young. So our only difference, obviously besides starter bench, was Jaylen Brown and Siakam. That was the only one we had different in terms of on our list. So, and by the way, we didn't discuss this at all off camera. Like, we had zero idea what list we were putting together. I'm sure our West will look a lot different, but before we get into that, I do want to talk about a couple snubs. And I want to start with my hardest snub. It was Tyrese Halliburton, and this is the guy where I ran into the super weird dilemma because I think Halliburton has been better than Siakam. Like, I think Halliburton is the best player on the Pacers. But because of the front court, back court thing, Halliburton ends up off my list entirely, and Siakam ends up as an all-star. That's so backwards to me. Why is that a thing? I don't get it. But Halliburton's case is really simple. Over the last month or month and a half or whatever, he's gotten back to the level he was at last year or even the year before. And when Halliburton has his thing going, there are very few players who can just drive an offense in the way that he does. Like, you talked about that pick and rolls including passes list, like an all pick and rolls.
He's like top 3, I think.
He's third in efficiency at 1.19 points per possession. They generate the best offense in the league when Halliburton just comes off a screen. And it's like, it's not the same type of like surgical, I'm going to get to my spots. It's like, I'm going to sprint down the court. You're going to set a really quick screen, and I'm going to make an instant decision to get off the ball. It might be to take a pull-up 3. It might be to drive into a floater. It might be a skip pass to a shooter or a shovel to the roller. But it's like these instant decisions that are always right on time, perfect, never turns the ball over, and then can also play off the ball as a shooter, as an extra passer. I think Halliburton is probably like, still at this point, I would say he's a better offensive player than Cade. Would you agree with that? In terms of like, if I had to pick one right now to lead the best offense, I would pick Halliburton. But like I said, the defense was what ultimately was the edge. I think Trae Young, I would take Trae Young as my offensive driver over Halliburton this season. Maybe not in the playoffs, but just in terms of what they've done in the season so far, I would take Trae Young. And then, so to me, that was a pretty easy pick. The one with Cade was like, I just think Cade is a legitimately fine defender, and Halliburton is one of those like really, really bad defenders. And I think Halliburton's had his moments too, because like he's got length and he's got some athleticism. Like every now and then you'll see a great save at the rim from Halliburton, and you're like, why doesn't he do that more? Because then you get these possessions where he's like a traffic cone, and it's like he's falling asleep, and it's like, yeah, so for me, it was the defense that held Halliburton off my list. But like I said, it was just so weird to me to have Siakam on, Halliburton off. It's just so backwards.
Yeah. Halliburton, pick and roll possessions and clean passes also have the 5th best turnover rate. Like, again, he does it, like, pick and rolls with Tally, he doesn't turn the ball over. In his isolated, like, he's actually the one scoring, it goes up by 1%, so it's a 7% turnover rate. Which, if we filter it out for like your individual scoring possessions, on 100 possessions, Halliburton would be 10th in efficiency when he's scoring out of a pick and roll, and turnover percentage, Hallie is number 1. Like, he just doesn't turn the ball over in ball screens.
And that's so, the fact that you know you're gonna get a shot every possession is so valuable, man. So valuable.
And that actually, I forget if this was your question or not, but this actually makes me feel even more like, yeah, I prefer Hallie over Cade as a offensive player. Was that the argument, right? Especially in a playoff setting, because in a playoff setting where we are talking about like valuing possessions, like you said, we are getting a shot up regardless with Hallie. Are we gonna like love every shot? Probably not, but we are getting a shot up because we are not turning the ball over, and we can put the ball in Halliburton's hands and feel really, really good about it. And then like you said, last 15 games for Hallie, 17 points, 9 assists, 62% true shooting. So like, yeah, you're kind of getting back to what he had been in years prior. Maybe the highs aren't as high as it felt like they were last season.
Well, last season the highs were 2016 Steph. That was crazy.
But yeah, like Hallie's a really, really good honorable mention, and I absolutely get your point, because I was wondering there for a second, like, wait, when are we going to get to the point where it's like the dilemma that he kind of was in? Any other like major honorable mentions for you?
Just one, and it was LaMelo.
Okay,
it was LaMelo Ball, and. Yeah, for me, so I was watching a Hornets game the other day. I think it was the game where he just emptied the clip and was like 7 for 30 or something crazy. I was watching it, and I was in a Discord call with some of my friends, and I said, LaMelo Ball is really good and really bad at the same time, and I don't really know how to evaluate him. Like, it makes no... And then someone actually, 2 days later, another one of my friends, I went out to eat, and he asked me, is LaMelo Ball good? And I was like, he's good, but it's like, it's so weird.
How good
like,
is he?
He's such a weird player to evaluate. I think first off, I want to start by saying the Hornets are starved of offensive talent. Mark Williams being as good as he's been has been like a huge step forward, but especially now without Brandon Miller, like there's not really many weapons LaMelo has to defer to or to get the ball to and expect like consistent production. It just doesn't exist. There's been games where they start a front court of Josh Green, Grant Williams, and Taj Gibson.
Ew,
what is that?
Taj Gibson, 2025. That's disgusting.
So it's like, yeah, LaMelo, no weapons, so I could be over-indexing on that. But I have 2 issues with LaMelo. One is the shot selection, and that kind of plays into like the whole argument with like the team. But it's like, he'll dribble down and shoot like a 30-foot pull-up 3 in transition before anything has even a chance to materialize. And then you'll have games where he's genuinely attempting like 18 3-pointers and making 5 of them.
Celtics
and it's like, that's
baby.
just straight up, that's just bad offense. Like, it's just, what were you saying? What'd you say? Sorry.
That's the Celtics effect, baby. Charles Lee. There we go.
Yeah. So this is why ratings are down. No, but in all seriousness, like when LaMelo has it going, he's like probably the most electric player in the league to watch right now, because it's just like he's so crafty, so creative. He's playing street ball out there. He's probably the most creative player in NBA history in terms of just like, I'm gonna do this and you've never seen it before. The one-legged threes, like, come on, bro.
He like leads the league in one-legged threes or something like that.
Yeah, like 3-point floaters. Like, what are we doing, dude? But like, those aren't always good shots. Most of the time, they're bad shots. And it's like more times than not, you're going to get like 28 to 30% makes. And then it's like, okay, now you're just letting the defense off the hook. Also, and this really goes into like, because like the guys I was battling with for LaMelo were Cade, Trey, and Halliburton. He was like in that mix. And to me, all of those 3 guys are like surgical pick and roll operators who can consistently make the right reads. LaMelo really struggles to make basic point guard reads. Like, how often do you see him just like make a timely shovel pass to the roller, or like put a defender on his hip and slowly work his way to the paint and get to a lob or a floater? It's like LaMelo kind of only plays at one speed, and it's like when his shot is falling, that speed is devastating. You can't do anything, and that's why he's averaging 30 points and 7 assists. But in terms of like, okay, now we're facing a high level defense that's gonna zone in on what I like to do, and I have to like pick them apart. LaMelo just doesn't have that for me. So of that group, I think he's probably the worst offensive player, just in terms of like who I would take to lead an offense. And I still want to, I'm kind of being negative. He is still an elite offensive player, and he's literally the only thing. He's the only thing keeping the Hornets from being the number 30 offense. Like, if you look at their lineup data, no matter what the lineup is, when he's on the floor, they're like a 111, 112, 113 offensive rating. When he's off the floor, it's like 101, 102, 104. So, like, that difference is really meaningful. But of those, like, you have that kind of signal with all of these guys. I just think if the team is more competitive, those guys can do more. And then also, LaMelo's a very, very bad defender, and I don't know how much of that has to do with the like just I'm not gonna try, we're gonna lose anyways. But like LaMelo does not play defense at all. So yeah, for me, it was just like maybe it's just the fact that all of these guys are on playoff teams and LaMelo's on like an 8-win team, and it's like that just creates this weird dilemma. But yeah, for me, LaMelo right there, really hard snub. But I do feel comfortable taking those other guys over him.
So a take that I had about LaMelo, this would have been 2 years ago, so like 2 off seasons ago. So this would have been heading into last season. I had said that I feel pretty comfortable like putting him like comfortably a tier below, maybe even at the time, maybe even 2 below, like a Trey, like a Hallie, Luka, for example, in terms of just purely playmaking, and that obviously just got shredded, right? Like people are like, "Oh no, you LaMelo hater." And I think I don't still feel like bad about it. Maybe 2 tiers like a stretch, but I do still feel like he's comfortably a tier below like that upper echelon, and maybe like middle of the pack of that tier that below. So, and yeah, like the talent around him is terrible. Brandon Miller has been able to like consistently stay healthy this season. Mark Williams just got back, and Mark Williams has been fantastic.
And I gave Trey credit for the Okongwu leap. I also want to give LaMelo credit for the Mark Williams stuff because he's finding him. He's getting him involved. But on your point about the playmaking, it's weird because I think people look at like, okay, I'm a high volume creator, and then I'm this level of passer. LaMelo has that. Like, he has the high volume creation, and I would say he's just as a pure passer, ignore like playmaking, just pure passing, probably top 5 to 7 on the planet. He's absurd,
especially in terms
passer.
of like creativity, like you said, like he can still hit every single pass. Like, we're just talking about the ability to make every pass that in your tool belt or whatever. Like LaMelo's like top 5. Like, it's LaMelo, Trey, Luka.
Right. In terms of like game slows down, you need to run pick and roll. You need to pick apart the defense and read these different coverages and make the right decisions. That's where LaMelo's like, you are not Trae Young. You are not Luka Doncic. And so, yeah, it's tough. It's tough because I agree with you. I think as a transition playmaker, LaMelo's absurd. But as a slowed down, and he's improved. I want to give him credit. He's improved. He's also really improved his driving. He's getting to the line more, getting to the rim more, finishing at the rim better. Yeah. So as a 2-point scorer, LaMelo has taken a significant leap. But still not enough of like a surgical half-court game to me. Because like I kind of view his style as closer to Halliburton than it is to like Cade Trey. But then it's like Halliburton's just simply way more efficient with everything he does. He less wasted movements, more efficient shooter, much more accurate and like decisive passer. So yeah, and then of course the defense thing, like I mentioned. So LaMelo was my number 2 snub. Are there any other guys that you really want to talk about, or should we just start like throwing names? Because I have a few names, but like they weren't really.
I just want to throw out names, honestly. LaMelo. Jalen Johnson's name I threw out there. Tyler Hero, Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine. Yes. And this one might be a little bit surprising, but Nikola Vucevic is like low key.
I had him.
He's low key hooping.
Dude, did you see? I was at B-Dubs the other night, and he had like 40 and 15 against the Hornets. Yeah. I think it was against the Hornets. Yep. That was crazy, bro.
Yeah, he's been really, really good. So that was kind of, and then Pascal, obviously, for me. Those are kind of the guys that I had on my honorable mentions.
Yeah, I had all of them, and then I actually had a couple other extra names. I had Porzingis. He was a tough one because he only played like 18 games, but he's been really, really good. He's actually been like alongside Tatum. I feel like those are the only 2 constants with Boston right now. I also had, feels weird, I had Jimmy Butler. Just because like there's a lot of weird stuff going on with his season, but in terms of just like product on the court, he's still a really, really good player. He's still like one of the best players in the league. Derek White was another one I had. Like I said, actually Derek White probably would have been an all-star for me a month ago, but like this last month, I don't know what happened. Everything just fell off a cliff, and maybe he was playing at an unsustainable level. I don't know, but yeah, Derek White fell off. I also had Bam Adebayo. Didn't feel great about him because of the weird season he's having. But I kind of talked about it with Jared Allen. When you're a certain level of defender, you're just always going to have that value.
Yeah.
And Bam is, to me, still a top 5 defender in the league. So it's like, yeah, you have to kind of consider him because he's just giving you that much defensive value. But, yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I think we're good on the East. think we're good on the
I
East.
think we are.
Let's move on to the West, man. It's gonna get interesting. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, really easy
Lock.
off the rip. Yeah, that's like the most easy. That's probably the easiest pick of any player besides like. Actually, it probably is the easiest pick of any player. I'm not gonna lie.
Do we want to just lock in Jokic too while we're at it?
Yeah, let's lock in Jokic. Those two are the two easiest picks of anyone in the league. It's just so easy.
Yes.
Who was your other backcourt starter?
My other backcourt starter was Anthony Edwards.
Fair.
That was my other backcourt starter.
You want to talk about it?
Who's your other one?
Mine was Steph Curry.
Okay,
but
absolutely fair.
Anthony Edwards was my first backcourt guy off the bench.
Okay. I think the argument for Steph is actually really, really easy. It's also, I think, pretty easy for Ant, too. So this is actually pretty fun. I think for Steph, the argument is just, look, I think I saw somebody put this tweet out the other day. I quote tweeted it. It was like, dog, Steph is in offensive hell right now. Steph Curry and then like Andrew Wiggins, but Andrew Wiggins is barely like impact-wise a positive player. Steph is the only thing going for that offense. And it's funny saying that after Wiggins just dropped like 30 points casually last night. But like impact data-wise for the entire season, Steph Curry is the only consistent positive for this Warriors team. And it's funny.
And can I say they have the number 19 offense? Like they're not some bottom feeding offense. Like Steph Curry is literally the only thing like keeping them like
middle of the pack,
a decently slightly below average offense.
Like I was watching their game against the Raptors the other night. Not because I'm a sicko, because I had money tied to that game one way or another. So degenerate gambler, not a sicko. Pick your choices wisely, kids. But it got down to like the fourth quarter of that game, and Darko, the Raptors coach, basically said, "Look, we're just gonna face guard and deny Steph, and if they try to set up ball screen, we're gonna switch it, then deny him again." And then it really just, bro, they were running freaking offense from Lindy Waters or Lindy Waiters or whatever. Dennis Schroeder spread pick and roll with Trace Jackson Davis is the most disgusting thing I've seen so far in 2025. In that game, really just highlight against a awful Raptors team. Although the Raptors just beat the Celtics, so hey. But that game really just showed like, dog, there is nothing on this team except Steph Curry offensively, and it sucks. But you're in year 12 of the Warriors motion stuff. Eventually, somebody's gonna catch on, and you don't have a second creator anywhere on this team. So, I think the argument for Steph is pretty simple. I went Ant because I think so Ant very much still, and this has been my argument for like a year at least now. Ant has a long way to go still from a decision making and playmaking standpoint. Like it's still like, and I think we saw that at his peak in the playoffs in that Dallas series. We saw it at his peak in that series. But what Ant's still able to do with zero front court spacing. Mike Conley, who I think now is starting to get the credit for like what he did previously. Now that he's like he hasn't been as good this season. Mike Conley taking a big step back. Dante DiVincenzo not having a good start to the season. He's kind of turning it around a little bit. Naz Reid not being as hot as he was maybe last season, and it kind of also feeling like, dude, Ant from a perimeter scoring and still perimeter decision making standpoint, it's like, Ant, please like help us. And he's gonna have his lapses, and maybe this is like a flawed point, but like, dog, it's the point for Anthony Edwards is he is a very, very flawed player, but damn, is he a really, really good one, and he's like the one of the few bright spots for this Timberwolves. I mean, Rudy Gobert impact wise is taking a step back defensively. Like, it's essentially like Ant. And it's Ant, we're sorry, but we broke apart the best team in past 20 years for you and gave you now zero front court spacing. Jay McDaniels is just never going to take that leap, I'm convinced, at this point offensively. So yeah, I went Ant, although Steph is my first backcourt bench player.
I think Ant deserves a little bit more credit for the fact that he's not just like taking a leap as a 3-point shooter. He's legitimately having one of the greatest 3-point shooting seasons ever.
Yeah.
It's like kind of just overlooked.
Can I say
pulled
something
up the
about
list.
the volume really quickly? Like,
go ahead.
Oh my God, Ant's taking that three. Who else is shooting for this Timberwolves team?
Yeah, he he has to. He's taking 10 threes a game and making 43% of them. He's in the top 10 all time in three-pointers made per game. Like rare, it's like a bunch of Steph seasons, a few Harden seasons, Klay Thompson, and then Anthony Edwards. Like that's the group he's in as three in terms of three-pointers made. And that is really, really valuable. The problem is for me with Ant, and why I ultimately gave the edge to Steph. Like I said, they're both all-star locks for me. I think Edwards gets a boost because people like the theoretical idea of him has been a lot better than the product this year. It's like, okay, now you have this 43% three-point shooter who also is explosive first step, slasher god. He's been like the worst 2-point scorer in the league this year, and I feel like that kind of gets overlooked. Like we talked about the drop-off with Jaylen Brown. This one is so much worse. So 2022, 51.9% from 2. 2023, 51.3%. 2024, 51.5%. So you have this baseline. It's like, yeah, you are a 51% 2-point scorer. This year, he's at 45.7% on 2-pointers. The spacing hurts, but there's something to be said about, like, you took away the spacing and now this guy can't score as a 2-point scorer. Like, if you are that caliber of scorer, like I'm thinking Shea. No matter what type of spacing Shea has, he's still going to be one of the best 2-point scorers in the league because he just has that in his bag. Like Anthony Edwards right now is shooting like 30% from mid-range and then like 60% at the rim. That's just so underwhelming for a guy who's like in the playoffs was giving you this world-class mid-range and combination of slashing and mid-range scoring. The 2-point scoring has just fallen off a cliff. And with that, his free throw rates are down. And so it's like his turnovers are also up. And so it's like you take the good with the bad. I kind of view him as like, I wish I could look at this 3-point leap and be like, yeah, he's taking a significant leap. But with the way the other stuff has come down, I basically view Edwards as the exact same caliber of player that he was last year, despite taking this huge 3-point leap. And so it's like, yeah, Edwards, you're still an All-NBA caliber player. You're still one of the first All-Stars for me. But you haven't taken that leap past Steph. And to me, like you said, the Steph argument's simple. You just have this offensive juggernaut. That's really all it comes down to. Like, the Warriors have no type of offense, and Steph comes in, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to shoot 41% from 3 and 11 attempts a game. I'm going to make 94% of my free throws. He's making 94% of his free throws. 2-point scoring, still down. Like it's about the same as last year, which I think was a regression. But it's, like, still a lot better than Ant. Just in terms of, like, I can get to my spots. I can get to the floater. I can get to the mid-range. So, yeah, I think the Steph argument's pretty simple. Those were my second and third backcourt guys, though, just like you.
Yeah. And I think you could, like, pretty easily swap those guys. Like I said, I kind of made the argument for both of those guys there within my monologue.
We both locked in Jokic. Who was your second front court guy?
My second front court guy was Wemby.
Same. And I don't think we really need to get into it. It's kind of like one of the Jokic things. Like, I feel like Wemby was an easy pencil in.
Yeah.
He's kind of slipped in these last few games, but in terms of just like the total body of work, 4 blocks per game, it's just so stupid. Like this already maybe the best defender in the league in terms of like I can do everything and I'm going to shut down the paint. And then like a legitimately efficient 25 point per game scorer who's also a good passer, legit elite floor spacer. Yeah, the Wemby argument to me, do you have anything to add? I feel like it's so easy.
No. Yeah, no real nothing to add there for me for Wemby.
So who was your next front court guy? I think I know who it is.
My next front court guy was Kevin Durant.
Wow. Okay.
Who do you think it was?
I had Anthony Davis, and I don't think I've ever been higher than you on Anthony Davis before.
Anthony Davis is my first front court
and
backcourt.
Honestly, I don't think we really need to talk about either of these guys. Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant, if you've been following the NBA, you know what these guys do. It's like you just they're all stars. It's like Kevin Durant, especially through that game against the Pistons yesterday. Yeah, just vintage KD. I'm going to get to my spots. I'm going to rise up. I'm going to score an efficient 27. There's nothing you can do about it, and I'm also a plus defender.
Yeah.
That's Kevin Durant. Anthony Davis is like, I'm a defensive chess piece that can do everything, regardless of the fact that the Lakers have nothing. Shout out Max Christie.
Hey,
Shout out Max
there
Christie.
you go.
Playing him has actually been such a big help for AD. And then also Dorian Finney-Smith coming in is a big help as well. But yeah, AD is like, I'm going to carry this defense as much as I possibly can while I do everything. And then I'm also the leading scorer and like offensive focal point of a legitimately good offense. So yeah, I think AD, really simple argument, two-way superstar. KD, just KD. It's KD. You know who I am.
You know who I am.
You know,
Kevin Durant. So yeah, my front court starters: Jokic, Wemby, KD. Backcourt stars: Shea, Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, so I had Shea, Steph, backcourt, front court, Jokic, Wemby, AD.
Okay.
Very simple. This next one is really interesting. The second backcourt spot off the bench, I think, could go to like 6 guys. Who did you end up going with for your second backcourt spot off the bench?
I went with Devin Booker.
Okay, fair.
Who'd you go with?
Fair. I went with James Harden.
Okay, so I thought I was gonna be crazy for really considering Harden for a future spot that we'll talk about later. He's hooping, man, and I like absolutely like.
So I just want to make my quick case for James Harden because I don't think it takes long. We talked about it with Trae Young and Cade. You have this guy who's like maybe isn't going to be the most efficient. What's really interesting is that because of James Harden's ability to generate free throws, he's actually league average efficiency with like 39-33 splits. And it's so funny to me. But yeah, it's so simple. It's like, okay, I'm going to come down the court. If I like my matchup, I'm gonna ISO, and I'm one of the most efficient ISO players on the planet still. If I don't like my matchup, I'm gonna have Zubats come set a pick and roll, and then it's like, okay, drop, I'm gonna turn the corner, 2-on-1, easy. Hedge, I'm gonna get the ball to Zubats, 4-on-3. Switch, now I have a big, I'm just gonna go back to efficient ISO. And it's like, yeah, it's so simple. He creates something every possession. Yes, you're gonna get a lot of missed shots. Yes, you're gonna get a lot of turnovers. No, he does not put pressure on the rim anymore. But in terms of just like, I can create for myself and others and keep this offense afloat. Clippers have the number 22 offense right now, but it's like they're at James Harden away from being like, it's kind of like the LaMelo Ball thing, like number 29, number 30. Like James Harden keeps them afloat enough. And also I think he's like a decently fine defender. Like I don't think Harden's some drastic negative defender. The Clippers, by the way, sneaky, number 2 defense right now. They have the number 2 defense. So and Harden plays a role in that as a playmaker, and they use him as a switch everything wing. So yeah, I think Harden, just pretty simple argument. I think the efficiency leaves a lot to be desired, but in terms of just like the Trae Young argument, where it's like surgical playmaker who can make every pass in the book and is going to create a shot every possession, that's the argument for me for James Harden.
Devin Booker, it became almost like a running joke in like Suns Twitter, which I have some fun, Suns mutuals or whatever on Twitter, that like, oh yeah, Devin Booker is just, not he's bad or whatever, but joke with he just turns to like super inconsistent and things like that. And then the past really 8 games, and if you look over like a 20-game sample size now, the numbers have really increased, but 7 of his last 8 games, he scored at least 30 points or more in. Over this 20-game stretch that I have pulled up here, he's averaging 27 points, almost 7 assists, 4 rebounds per game, while also having a +2 true shooting percentage, 59.2% true shooting. He's been, over the past 10 games for sure, but over this like increased sample, he's been, I think, like a pretty good all-star. And over the last 10 games, him along with Kevin Durant have been playing at a caliber that could win them MVP if they were good enough, right? That's how good they have been over this recent stretch. They're 21-20, and they're 11th seed, so they are not going to win MVP. But the caliber of play that they have played at, they now added a competent big, too. Thank God. I mean, Nick Richards. He immediately becomes their best big here in Phoenix. Devin Booker, I maybe this is guilt for leaving off my scores list that we did a while back. But Devin Booker for me is my second bench guard, if you will.
I actually didn't have Booker on my list, and it was my number 1 omission. It was tough. I think over, like you said, these last few games, playing at an All-NBA level, like playing like a top 15, top 12 player. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like consistency across the board from the beginning of the season, he was all over the place shooting wise. Yeah. And then the fact that he went like, what was it, 1-8 without KD after starting as the 1 seed?
Yeah.
That kind of made me like, cringe a little bit because I look at the Clippers that are like 23-17 or whatever, like legitimately have a chance to get home court in the playoffs with Harden as the driving force.
Yeah.
And then look at a team like the Suns that like once KD went down, Booker had to play that role, and they just
didn't succeed.
They collapsed.
Yeah.
And so that was what was tough for me. I think over this recent stretch, Booker would be a lock. And it's weird because like by the time the All-Star game arrives, Booker will probably build on this and have like a significantly better looking profile than all of these other guys. But in terms of just like if I had to cast my vote right now, I think Booker for like that first half of the season was just a little bit too underwhelming, so I just had him as my first guy off.
Fair. All right, so we're on our last two front court backup spots, right?
Yes. I had Jaren Jackson Jr.
Okay.
Pretty simple argument for me has been the go-to scoring option for one of the best offenses in the NBA in Memphis. He's like his post-up game, his ISO game, him as a floor spacer. I still think there are a lot of flaws in his scoring, especially when he gets like matched up with someone who's just physically capable of sticking with him and then having the length. Like he had 2 bad games against San Antonio. It's because like Wemby can just kind of take away what he wants to do as like a bully ball kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And then also like AD completely took him out of that series in 2023. Obviously Jaren's improved a lot since then, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, I think he's a legitimate go-to scoring guy for one of the best offenses. Still a very lackluster passer, but just provides value. Just a lot of good positive offensive value in terms of like what he can do on and off the ball. And then as a defender, it's a little bit more extreme than the Mobley thing where it's like Jaren Jackson can't be an anchor. Like he's not a good enough drop defender. He's not a good enough rebounder, but can switch across the board. Elite shot blocker and rim protector. Great defensive playmaker. Great hands. Has really cut down on the fouling. So for me, it's a simple two-way argument. It's like you're a positive offensive player. You're probably a top 7 to 8 defender in the league still. So yeah, for me, pretty easy argument. Two-way star, and probably will get some All-NBA love as well.
Yeah, I also had Jaren Jackson Jr. on my list as well. So
was he your next guy, or did you have someone else?
I had LeBron. I had LeBron still.
So that's an interesting one for me because LeBron was actually a wild card for me.
Okay.
And I kind of even felt weird about that. So this is going to sound really hatery. And I love LeBron, man. I got to say it, man. Love LeBron.
No, he doesn't.
But the season he's having is so hard to evaluate because the scoring has been really inconsistent and kind of reliant on the jumper, which he's a really good jump shooter at this point. So like I'm not like I'm worried about it. But like the defense has just been like, he's just a bad defender at this point. And in the playoffs, that might change. But in terms of like what we've seen through 40 games, just a bad defender.
Can I say something about that? I think Bron's been a bad defender for like since Solomon Hill injury. He's legit been a bad defender for like going on 4 years now.
But would you agree? I don't even necessarily disagree, but would you agree that this year's been even just like noticeably worse?
I think it's on par with last season's. I'm not gonna lie.
Really?
Like I think
actually, but also 2023 was really bad too because he had the injury.
Yeah. So like you have this,
but then in the playoffs, he was a great defender.
In that playoff, he was a really, really good defender. Last year, I'd say he was like an average defender in the playoffs last season. This year, yes, he has been a really, really bad defender.
And that's what's tough for me because like it's like how and almost so what felt weird to me is like I had him as a wild card and I even considered just having him as a non-all-star, but like this is where name value just completely hit me across the face like a baseball bat. I was like, I cannot
I'm not gonna
have LeBron. Like LeBron James is an all-star. Just if I had LeBron James as a non-all-star, I would feel sick to my stomach.
I just wouldn't have let you done that.
Yeah, and I want to also say like it's not like I'm just including him because of the name. Like LeBron's still been an awesome offensive player. As a playmaker, he's averaging like 9 assists. He plays multiple roles. Like he's so versatile for the Lakers team. You can use him as a screener. You can use him as an off-screen guy. You can use him as a spot-up shooter, as a point guard. And so there's still so much value with that. And I still think he's the driving force behind LA's offense, even if AD's more of a focal point. So yeah, I do think LeBron's still worthy. I had him as a wild card though, and not as my third front court guy personally.
Yeah, so, I mean, I know Austin has gotten a lot more touches recently, especially now that D'Lo's gone for the Lakers, but the AD is the number one option in terms of, like, scoring and, like, you know, the box score stats, and I think AD's production's even dropped a little bit, unless I'm, like,
it has
tripping.
a little bit.
Yeah. But if we're still asking like who is the like primary decision maker and who is the guy that like gets the action and stuff going, 80 was like 30 points per game at one point. He's at 25 now. Sheesh. It's still LeBron, and LeBron's also quietly, I think he's maybe gotten a little bit more love like on social media recently. Bron is having one of his best mid-range shooters of his career. Like I don't know.
Yes.
On mid-range jumper since like the last season that he was in Cleveland. If that makes sense. Like it was at a point last year, and maybe especially like that 2023 season, like post foot injury or whatever, where I'm actively asking LeBron to not shoot mid-range jumpers because it felt like it was just a guaranteed miss, especially after like that foot injury. But this season, he's shooting 44% from the mid-range this season. Like,
wow.
And last season, 39% if you round up, 39%, 23. Like, he's been like consistently like a mid-30s percent from the mid-range. As a matter of fact, this is LeBron's best season from the mid-range since like peak LeBron or peak athletic version of LeBron, which everybody attributes to 2013, right? The turnovers, I think, would be the thing I would be a little bit concerned about with LeBron, where he has some more like boneheaded turnovers than normal. I feel like, but like I said, like he's the number one decision maker. I mean, 61% true shooting percentage, I think. So he's still +5 efficiency. I love the point you brought up about the versatility. And some of the concerns I have about LeBron, I just simply won't have come April if this team's good enough to make the playoffs. So I'm able to ignore it a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's 100% fair. And like I said, I still had him as an all-star. I think you made really good points. I think specifically, like I was watching that Heat game, his takeover in the fourth quarter with straight mid-range jumpers was crazy. Like out of nowhere, he just decided, I'm going to make like 8 straight mid-range jumpers and you're not going to do anything. And he only had like 9 points up to that point, so he just like took over the game. Yeah, makes sense. But like I said, I had him as a wild card. My third front court guy was actually Sabonis.
Okay. I feel great now. Please continue.
I think Sabonis is having the most underrated season of any player in the league. Okay, first of all, he's taken a sizable leap as a jump shooter, and it's mostly just because of the willingness. I kind of talked about it with Mobley a little bit, but I don't think people realize how good of a shooter Sabonis actually can be because, first of all, like getting really into the specifics, ball rotation is really good on Sabonis' shot. Like, if you watch his shot, it looks really good. And two, they're all like perfect makes. Like when he makes it, it's not rattling in, it's not glassing in. It's like a perfect swish every time. Sabonis is shooting 48% from 3 on 2.5 attempts a game. So here's the thing. Sabonis has a super slow shot form. So you're not really getting value in terms of like pick and pop unless the defender overcommits to the ball. It's not like I'm going to pick, but it's like if the defense wants me to shoot, I will make the shot. It's not like the Golden State series where they can sag off and he's not going to make them pay. Sabonis is going to make the defense pay. And it got to a point now where under Doug Christie, they are designing plays to get him 3-pointers. Like I saw him come off a pin down from Malik Monk in one of their recent games and then drill a 3 from the wing. And I was like, whoa, Sabonis, chill. And then it's like, you still have everything else. You have the best decision-making center not named Jokic in the league, elite passer, elite screener, leading the league for the 3rd straight year at 14 rebounds a game, 4 of which are offensive. Also on the point to the shooting leap, free throw percentage is up 7% this year. So like just a genuinely sizable leap. 2-point percentage is 63. Bro, 63% from 2 and 48% from 3 is diabolical work. Even if most of your shots are assisted. That is crazy work. On the season, he's averaging 21, 14, and 6 on 67% true shooting. Can we please talk about how good of an offensive player Sabonis is? Like, dude, crazy offensive player. Also, defensive adjustments they've made. They're bringing Sabonis up to the level more. They're having him switch more. He's hedging more. And fine defender. Not a bad defender. Perfectly fine at the level, pick and roll defender. On the season, +5 net rating with him on the floor. So the Kings, like, not only have they turned it around, they've been legitimately just good with Sabonis on the floor this season. They're just a good team when he's on the floor. He gets everyone involved. He's what makes the three-headed snake of Monk, DeRozan, Fox work without diminishing returns because everything can revolve around him as a connector. So yeah, I think Sabonis is just like straight up having the most underrated season of any player in the league. I even considered bumping him up above Jaren Jackson as my second front court guy. Like, that's how high I am on Sabonis right now.
So I'm just going to go ahead and do my wild cards because my 2 wild cards are James Harden, Domantas Sabonis.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm so glad you had Sabonis here because for a split second I was like, oh, I don't know if this is a hot take with like having Sabonis listed here. But he's been so good this season. And
yeah,
like I think he's been their best player. Like, I do not have De'Aaron Fox on my
easily
did not consider De'Aaron Fox. And that, may come off as harsh, but I just simply didn't consider him. And the point that you made about the defense, dog, if you ask Sabonis to sit in a drop and be a drop anchor big, he is not a good defender. I would say he's like a bottom 5 drop defender in the league, right? It's like it would be a group of like him, Jokic, and Kat at this point. That would be and Jalen Duren. All right, well, crap. Let's find a 5th guy now at this point. I, for some reason,
let's just say Taj Gibson, just because Taj Gibson shouldn't be playing.
Okay, but if you tell, similarly to like 2023, like championship Jokic, if you tell Sabonis like we're gonna hedge, put you at the level, and we'll have you basically be a versatile big in air quotes defensively in terms of like we're just not gonna have you camp and drop, we're just gonna have you be at the level of the screen big. He's an above average big defensively.
Yeah, dude, and that's been a thing. Remember, I think out of any of the series I've seen Steph play, the 2023 series was probably the best pick and roll defense I've seen played on him.
Yeah.
And then he still had 50 in Game 7, so it's like
it just doesn't matter.
But like, dude, he was legitimately playing good defense at the level for like 40 minutes a game.
Yeah, and this is also like if you look at impact metrics, this is his best defensive season of his career. Like plus 1.5 EPM, defensive EPM. If you look at like B-ball indexes, defensive LeBron, A- defensive LeBron, which I would just assume is a career high for Domantas Sabonis. And then you add on top of that the shooting. Like he's shooting 47% on pick and pop threes, shooting 43% on spot up threes. Sorry, 45% pick and pop threes, 43.5% on spot up threes this season. Ultra versatile offensive player. Not gonna have like a lot of. I don't love him in self creation still. I still think that's like absolutely warranted. But everything else offensively for Sabonis, decision making, the ability to play off ball like in 2-man game with De'Aaron Fox or Malik Monk, honestly. Malik Monk he's a stud. He's so good.
He's awesome. I love Malik Monk.
The shooting coming around just adds even more value. One of the best rebounders in the league. So I'm glad you brought him up. And then Harden for me, pretty simple. It's really just like, dog, no Kawhi Leonard. I think a lot of people were counting the Clippers out, and Harden said, no, I'm still like a really, really good floor raiser at the very least, to where we're going to have the 20th best offense and be completely fine because then we have these other guys that can play defense, and I'll, pick my spots defensively. I'll get steals, create some havoc, and then in the half court, I'm just going to, dice you up in pick and roll. I'm going to dice you up in isolation, get my matchups that I want. And, okay, cool beans. You held me to 40% shooting, but I'm league average efficiency still because I'm getting to the line and putting your best defenders in foul trouble. While also helping Norman Powell to having a career year. While also helping Zubac having a career year. And then when the demon number 2 comes back, we'll be like a middle-of-the-pack offense. They'll get to the playoffs and be the team you don't want to play. Like, that's kind of the plan, and it worked. So, Harden for me was my other all-star. He was my other wild card.
Perfectly great cases for both of those guys. I had them both as well. I got one wild card spot left because, like I said, I had Booker off. So that's the one difference for me. My wild card, and dude, even just right before we started recording the show, I was like flipping these guys back and forth. Like, which one do I want for the wild card? Which one do I want off? For me, I went with Kyrie Irving.
Okay.
And it was so tough. It was so tough between Kyrie and Booker. To me, and this feels kind of cheap because the Mavs do have a way better and deeper team
That
than
Mavs team is
Phoenix.
so deep, and they don't get enough
Yeah,
credit
they're
for it.
awesome. The roster's amazing. But I want to give so much credit to Kyrie for the fact that they've been legitimately good without Luka. They're 8-4 with Kyrie playing and Luka not playing. And that is just like, that's what you want from your number 2. Kyrie can play off of Luka so well as an off-the-catch weapon. It's like, I'm going to spot up and make 45% of my catch and shoot threes. I'm going to torch closeouts, get to my 50% mid-range jumper or my 70% layup. And it's like, what do you do with him as a scorer, as an off-the-catch weapon? You can't do anything. And then it's like, okay, bench unit. Now I'm going to start running some spread pick and roll. I'm going to isolate. I'm going to play out of the post. Kyrie's just this awesome scoring weapon. And then it's like, okay, Luka's down. Now we need that times 10. And Kyrie's done it. He's done it. This is like the 3rd year in a row now where like whenever a star gets injured, he just carries the load.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the difference maker that I was thinking about. I was like, not necessarily the team winning or losing, but when KD went down, how did Booker look? When Luka went down, how did Kyrie look?
Yeah.
Because I think both are just like average type of defenders. I don't really write home about either of those guys defensively, and I don't think they're huge negatives. I just kind of feel, they're both fine. Yeah, to me, that was the difference. And I just barely got the nod. Like 50.1 versus 49.9 is how I felt about Kyrie over Booker. But yeah, I just wanted to give credit to Kyrie for doing what he's been doing without Luka.
Kyrie is my first honorable mention.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the biggest takeaway from the West that might pop up in the comments is the top of the West is not really represented by our All-Star picks, because we both only have one Thunder. Well, there's only one other Thunder you probably would consider, that'd be J-Dub. We have no Rocket players, and the Rockets are the 2 seed. Yep. We only have one Grizzly. You're not really going to consider anybody else not named Jokic on Denver. But do you have any thoughts on that? How the top of the West is really well represented?
I was going to say, I have a lot of those guys in my honorable mentions, like those top end guys. Like I think Şengün is a good one.
Şengün's also at the top, along with J-Dub for me.
I think Şengün is a legitimately great defender at this point. That might be a hot take, but especially when I was watching, what game was it?
Was this
recently,
Sacramento when they played Sacramento?
It was. It was Sacramento. He had 4 elite defensive plays in a row. It was like one of them was Malik Monk or De'Aaron Fox had a wide open layup, and Şengün rotated from the top of the key to block it off glass. Next play, Şengün switched onto Malik Monk and shut him down in isolation. Third play, Şengün blitzed a pick and roll and forced a turnover. And then I don't even remember what the fourth play, full court press. He stole the inbound. And I was like, bro, Şengün makes so many great defensive plays. So if I was talking about Şengün as a player, I actually think he's I'd be higher defensively on him than probably anyone, but I'd also be lower than him offensively, or lower on him offensively than anyone. And it's just I talked about it specifically in the Kings game. The huge difference between him and Sabonis is the decisiveness and the quality of their decision making. Mm-hmm. When Şengün gets the ball at the top of the key, most of the time he's going to sit there for 5 seconds and just stare his defender in the eye and be like triple threat. And it's okay, I could go to a handoff. I could isolate you. I could shoot. Whereas Sabonis catches the ball, instant, next action. I'm going to get into something else. And some of that is Sacramento having more offensive talent than Houston, but it's also just a function of Sabonis is so much more valuable as your offensive centerpiece. One of the best things with Sabonis that I've talked about for years, how many centers in the league are you comfortable giving 85, 90 touches to for an entire game? It's Jokic and Sabonis. Those are the two. Şengün is not that guy for me, and Şengün's also a very inefficient scorer at this point, which, again, some of it has to do with spacing. And I think Houston, as a team, I love their collectiveness.
Yeah.
One of the best defensive teams in the league. And then it's you want to give them an all-star, but things have broken through at the perfect moments for them. First half of the season, they were the number 2 defense, and it was we're going to win games off our defense. We're going to make games 95-92.
Yeah.
Now it's Jalen Green out of nowhere is a 30-point per game scorer, but you can't make him an all-star because the first half of the season, he was a legitimate, maybe even a negative player. So it's yeah, Şengün, I think, deserves credit. I wouldn't be mad at anyone picking him as an all-star, but if it's between him and Sabonis, I feel pretty good about Sabonis.
Yeah. Top 3 or top 4, I guess, honorable mentions for me were Kyrie, J-Dub, Alfred Sengun, and then De'Aaron Fox. Those were like the top guys.
I had those, and then I had Ja Morant as
then
well.
Ja.
Those were my
Yeah.
guys. And so, yeah, it's like Ja, I think, actually has had a pretty weak season as a scorer. He's kind of been all over the place, and I don't really know what to do with him. J-Dub just hasn't shown me enough as a creator. Dude, especially that game without Shea against Dallas.
Yeah.
Like, it just looked like he was non-existent until, like, the end of the third quarter.
Why didn't Shea play? I feel like Shea never misses games.
I don't know. I didn't actually see what the report was. I just turned on the game and he wasn't on the court, and I was like, okay, this is weird. Yeah, J-Dub, I love the defensive leap he's taken. I love him as an off-the-catch weapon off of Shea. But the difference between him and a Kyrie is, like I said, no Luka, Kyrie turns into a number one. No Shea, J-Dub is the same player, maybe even worse. And it's like, you just don't get that next offensive punch from him that I'd like to see. So I'm not there yet for J-Dub as an all-star. Fox, I just couldn't fit him in. I just think Kyrie and Booker are a little bit better.
Yeah.
That's
basically
that's what it is. Any other thoughts?
No. I remember saying that, I'm sure I'm gonna regret this 30 minutes in, and I now looking at this feel pretty all right. So hey,
I feel good. I feel better now after talking through it than I did going into it. You want to rename your Western team, or actually let's do both teams. Name your East and your West.
Sure. I'll start out East. My starting lineup is Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell as my backcourt, Tatum, Giannis, and Kat as my front court. My backups started with the guards. Darius Garland, Damian Lillard, my front court backups, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, Jaylen Brown, and my wild cards out east are Trae Young and Cade Cunningham. Going to the west, my starting backcourt, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards. My front court starters, Kevin Durant, Victor Wembanyama, Nikola Jokic. My backcourt backups, Devin Booker, Steph Curry. And my front court backups, good grief, LeBron, Anthony Davis, Jaren Jackson Jr., and my wild cards out west are James Harden and Domantas Sabonis.
Nice. Okay. For me, the East, backcourt, Brunson and Garland. The front court, Giannis, Tatum, and Karl Anthony Towns. My bench backcourt, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell. My bench front court, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, Pascal Siakam. And my wild cards, Cade Cunningham and Trae Young. Out west, we got backcourt, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Steph Curry. Front court, Jokic, Wemby, AD. Bench backcourt, Anthony Edwards and James Harden. Front court, KD, Triple J, Sabonis. And my two wild cards, LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. That's going to do it, man. I can't wait to see all of the things we got wrong in the comments. I'm going to actually make a little graphic and post my picks on Twitter and get a bunch of hate on there, so that'll be fun. But, yeah, man, we appreciate you guys listening. If you did all the way through, this was a really fun episode. I'm excited to switch it up a little bit and do something a little bit different. Let us know if you want more episodes like this. Like if you want us to do like a mid-season awards pick or something like that, that'd be fun. But yeah, for now, make sure you follow us on social media. My stuff is all under @TylerBritton_ or Hoop Venue, as you probably know me better as. Sean on Instagram, Sean_Davis23. On Instagram, Sean_DAVI. On YouTube, the Sports Headline Show or the Los Angeles Lakers Network. All of those good links will be in the description if you're watching on YouTube, by the way. So if you're watching on YouTube, just go to the description and you'll find all of our good social medias. But once again, we appreciate you guys listening, and we will catch you guys next time for episode number 23.